The Galactic Council made their biggest mistake 300 years before humanity even knew they existed. They assumed we'd beg. When the Zephyron Directorate Survey fleet finally dropped into Earth's orbit, they didn't come with weapons hot. They came with documents. 17,000 pages of galactic integration protocols, all translated into what their linguistic AI assured them was acceptable human communication standard. They expected gratitude. They expected us to fall over ourselves thanking them for the privilege of becoming the galaxy's newest servant species. What they got instead was silence. Not the silence of fear. Not the silence of shock, though there was plenty of that to go around when their motherships blotted out the sun over New York, Beijing, and Mumbai simultaneously. No, this was the silence of a species that had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of not showing their hand until the moment came to play it. While the Zephyron broadcast their demands across every frequency, expecting immediate capitulation, humanity's governments were already 13 moves ahead. Because here's what the Galactic Council didn't know about humans, what they couldn't have known from their sterile observations and their confident projections. We've been preparing for this moment since we first looked up at the stars and wondered what looked back. The council chamber of the Zephyron Directorate was a monument to 1,000 conquered species. Crystallized bone from the Kelrath homeworld formed the walls. The seats were carved from the last trees of Verdania before the world was stripped for resources. Even the air itself was imported from Praxis 9, giving everything a faint purple tint that the Zephyron found aesthetically pleasing. Supreme Director Cathrix stood at the center, all four of his manipulator limbs spread wide in a gesture of magnanimous authority. "The human response?" he asked, not bothering to hide his amusement. His intelligence officer, a smaller Zephyron named Velis, consulted his data pad with obvious confusion. "Nothing, Supreme Director. Radio silence across all channels. Their governments have gone dark." "Dark?" Cathrix's sensory ridge flared with something between irritation and disbelief. "We gave them 48 standard hours to respond. Their response window closed 6 hours ago." "Yes, Supreme Director. But there's been no acknowledgement. No counteroffers. No pleas for negotiation. Their military installations have powered down. Their satellite networks have ceased standard operations. It's as if they're ignoring us?" Cathrix's voice carried the weight of someone unaccustomed to being ignored. "Impossible. No species ignores their first contact with galactic civilization. Especially not when that contact comes with a combined fleet strength of 73 member worlds hovering over their most populous centers." But humanity wasn't ignoring the Zephyron. Far from it. In a bunker 3 miles beneath the Colorado Rockies, Fleet Admiral Sarah Chin stood before a holographic display that would have made the Zephyron's technology look like cave paintings. The room hummed with the quiet efficiency of humanity's greatest secret. We've been reverse engineering crashed alien technology for the better part of 2 centuries. Not the crude conspiracy theories about Roswell. Those were distractions, deliberately seeded to make people look in the wrong direction. The real discoveries had come from debris fields the Zephyron themselves had left behind, wreckage from their previous conquests scattered across the cosmic neighborhood. "Status on Operation Sleeping Dragon?" Chen's voice was steady, betraying none of the tension that filled the command center. 93% ready, Admiral," responded Commander Marcus Webb, his fingers dancing across haptic interfaces. "The Forge Worlds report full production capacity. New Adelaide, Kepler Station, and Titan shipyards are all green. We'll hit 100% in 18 hours. And our friends?" Webb allowed himself a slight smile. "The Forgotten are moving into position as we speak." The Forgotten. That's what humanity had started calling them, the species the Galactic Council had tried to erase from history. While the Zephyron had been busy perfecting their image as benevolent overlords, humanity's deep space exploratory missions had been making different kinds of discoveries. Not new worlds to colonize, but old ones. Dead ones. Worlds the Council had deemed unprofitable and left to rot after stripping them of anything valuable. But death, as humanity knew better than most species, was often a matter of perspective. The VRYN had been a spacefaring civilization for 6,000 years before the Council came. They'd perfected quantum fold technology, could manipulate spacetime itself. The Zephron had wanted that technology. The VRYN had refused to share it. So the Council did what they always did with non-compliant species. They bombed the VRYN homeworld into radioactive glass and moved on, assuming they'd eliminated the problem. They'd eliminated 97% of the problem. The other 3% had gone deep, hiding in the stellar graveyards and dead zones the Council considered beneath their notice. And they'd been waiting. Waiting for someone, anyone, who might help them take back what was stolen. Enter humanity, stage left, with a chip on our shoulder the size of Earth itself and a historical track record of holding grudges that could outlast geological epochs. First contact with the VRYN had happened 9 years ago, when the survey ship Magellan picked up what should have been impossible, a distress beacon broadcasting in a language that predated the Council's official formation. Captain Elena Rodriguez had made the decision to investigate against direct orders, a decision that would change the course of human history. What they found was a single VRYN station, hidden in the gravity well of a neutron star where sensors couldn't penetrate. 300 souls, the last survivors of their species, keeping their technology and their hatred alive on nothing but hope and spite. "You're human," the VRYN elder had said through translation software, her crystalline features reflecting the dim light of their dying station. "We've watched your world. The Council doesn't know you exist yet, but they will. And when they come, they'll offer you 2 choices, submit or die." "And if we choose neither?" Rodriguez had asked. The elder's equivalent of a smile was terrifying. "Then perhaps we have something to discuss." That discussion had led to 9 years of the most intensive technological exchange in human history. The VRYN taught us their quantum fold technology, their space-time manipulation, their weapon systems that could crack planets. In exchange, humanity offered something the VRYN had lost: numbers, industrial capacity, and most importantly, the element of surprise. Because the Council, in their infinite arrogance, still had no idea we'd met. Back in the Colorado bunker, Admiral Chen pulled up a tactical display that showed not just Earth's solar system, but a 3-dimensional map stretching across 40 light-years. Red icons marked the Zephron fleet positions, clustered arrogantly in high Earth orbit. Blue icons marked humanity's visible forces, our conventional navies and air forces, deliberately kept primitive-looking to maintain the illusion of a species caught flat-footed by first contact. But the green icons, those told a different story. 12 full battle groups, Chen murmured, studying the display. Hidden in the Kuiper Belt, the Oort Cloud, and fold space pockets the Zephron don't even know exist. Each one carrying VRYN-enhanced weapons that outclass their fleet by 2 generations. Plus our ace in the hole. "The dreadnoughts?" Webb asked quietly. Chen nodded. 5 completed, 2 more launching within the week. The Zephron think humanity's biggest ship is a 200-meter destroyer. They have no idea we've been building kilometer-long capital ships in mobile shipyards they can't detect. "When do we drop the hammer?" "When they're good and committed," Chen replied. The Council sent their main expeditionary fleet. 73 worlds worth of military assets, all concentrated here because they're so confident we'll fold. If we hit them now, other Council fleets can respond. But if we wait until they're fully engaged, fully invested in Earth's occupation, we can trap them. Webb finished. Cut them off from reinforcements, destroy them in detail, and send a message to the rest of the galaxy. Exactly. The message being, humanity doesn't beg. Humanity doesn't submit. And humanity really doesn't forget. The holographic display updated as new data streamed in. Throughout Earth's solar system, preparations that had been in motion for nearly a decade were reaching culmination. On Mars, hidden railgun batteries powered up for the first time, their barrels aimed at carefully calculated firing solutions. In the asteroid belt, what appeared to be simple mining operations revealed themselves as mobile weapons platforms, each one capable of accelerating multi-ton projectiles to relativistic speeds. And beyond the solar system, in the cold dark between stars, humanity's real trump card waited in absolute silence: the Forge Worlds. When the VRYN had shared their fold space technology, they'd included something even more valuable: the knowledge of how to hide entire industrial complexes in dimensional pockets. Humanity had taken that knowledge and run with it, constructing 12 massive shipyards that existed partially phased out of normal space. To any scanner, even the Zephron's supposedly sophisticated sensors, they simply didn't exist. You could fly right through their physical location and detect nothing but empty space. Inside those Forge Worlds, humanity had been building an armada. 300 warships of completely new design, incorporating VRYN technology with human innovation in ways that created something neither species could have achieved alone. Quantum fold drives that could jump a fleet across light years instantaneously. Temporal shields that could make ships effectively invulnerable for short bursts. And weapons, oh the weapons! Particle beams that could slice through the Zephron's best armor like tissue paper. Missiles that could track targets through fold space. And the piece de resistance, singularity cannons that could create and direct miniature black holes. The Zephron thought they were dealing with primitives who'd barely mastered chemical rocketry. They had no idea they'd picked a fight with a species that had learned to weaponize the fundamental forces of physics itself. Supreme Director, Velas interrupted Cathrix's contemplation with obvious nervousness. We're detecting anomalies. Define anomalies. Power signatures. Across the human solar system. They weren't there an hour ago, but now. Velas's manipulators trembled slightly. Sir, there are energy readings coming from locations our initial survey marked as uninhabited. And they're significant. Very significant. Cathrix felt the first stirring of something he hadn't experienced in decades: uncertainty. Show me. The holographic display lit up with hundreds of new contacts. What should have been a primitive solar system with one inhabited planet suddenly looked like a fortified military zone. Cathrix's sensory ridge contracted in confusion and growing alarm. This is impossible. Our intelligence said the humans had barely colonized their own moon. How can they have this kind of infrastructure? I don't know, Supreme Director. But whatever these installations are, they're powering up. And Velas paused, checking his readings again as if hoping they'd change. And they're targeting our fleet. For the first time in his long career, Supreme Director Cathrix felt the cold touch of fear. Back on Earth, Admiral Chen watched the Zephron fleet's formation begin to shift, their ships moving from a confident occupation pattern into something more defensive. Her lips quirked into a smile that had no warmth in it whatsoever. They're starting to figure it out, she said. Took them longer than I expected. Their intelligence really is garbage. Orders, Admiral? Webb asked. Not yet. Let them sweat. Let them realize that maybe, just maybe, they've made a catastrophic miscalculation. I want them afraid before we show them why they should be terrified. Across the solar system, in the shadows of Jupiter's moons, a different conversation was taking place. The VRYN elder, whose name was Thessera in human phonetics, stood on the bridge of the stealth ship Remembrance, surrounded by her species survivors and the human liaison officers who'd become their closest allies. 9 years, Thessera said, her crystalline voice resonating with emotion the translation software struggled to convey. 9 years since your captain found us. 9 years since we dared to hope again. And now we take back what they stole. Commander James Park finished. He was one of the first humans to learn the VRYN language without translation assistance, and he understood better than most what this moment meant to them. Not just revenge. Justice. Is there a difference? Thessera asked. For humans? Sometimes. For the VRYN? After what the Council did to you? Park shook his head. No. No difference at all. And we're okay with that. The Remembrance's sensors painted a picture of the battlefield to come. The Zephyron fleet hung in space like ripe fruit, concentrated and vulnerable. Around them, invisible to their sensors, humanity's forces moved into final positions. And beyond those, even more ghosts gathered. The VRYN weren't the only species the Council had tried to erase. Humanity's deep space expeditions had found others. The Kelrath, reduced to a few thousand survivors hiding in the radiation-soaked ruins of their homeworld. The Praxis, driven to near extinction when the Council decided their ocean world would make an excellent water source. The Verdanians, turned into refugees when their forest planet was clear-cut for exotic lumber. Each species humanity found, we'd offered the same deal: help us prepare, and when the time comes, help us fight. Not for conquest. Not for domination. But for the simple, pure purpose of teaching the Galactic Council that some species don't lie down and die when told to. Some species fight back. Supreme Director, Bellis's voice had climbed to something approaching panic. New contacts. Thousands of them. They're appearing all across the system, seemingly out of nowhere. Our sensors can't get solid locks. They're using some kind of stealth technology we've never encountered. Catherick stared at the display as it filled with red warning icons. His certainty, his absolute confidence in the Council's supremacy, cracked like frozen glass. How is this possible? The humans should be primitives. They should be begging us for mercy, not, "Sir, we're being hailed." Human source. Put it through. Admiral Sarah Chin's face appeared on the view screen, and Catherick felt his confidence shatter completely. There was no fear in those eyes. No desperation. No pleading. Instead, there was something he recognized from his own mirror. The cold certainty of someone who held all the cards and was about to play them. Supreme Director Catherick, Chin said, her voice carrying across the void between their ships. I am Fleet Admiral Sarah Chin of the United Earth Defense Force. On behalf of humanity and our allies, I'm here to inform you that your occupation of Earth is over before it began. Your allies? Catherick's voice carried disbelief. You've been isolated until now. You have no allies. Chin's smile could have frozen stars. That's what you thought. That's what you wanted to think. But while you were busy congratulating yourself on finding another primitive species to exploit, we were busy finding all the species you tried to erase. The VRYN, the Kelrath, the Praxis, the Verdanians, and a dozen others whose names you don't even remember because you considered them too insignificant to record. The display behind Chin shifted, showing ship signatures that made Catherick's sensory organs contract in primordial horror. Designs he recognized from classified Council archives. Ships that shouldn't exist, crewed by species that should be extinct. We remembered them, Chin continued, her voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. We found them. We gave them hope. And together, we've spent the last 9 years preparing for this exact moment. So here's how this is going to go, Supreme Director. You're going to take your fleet and leave. You're going to return to your council and tell them that Earth is off limits. Forever. And if they don't believe you, if they send more fleets, we'll destroy those too. Because humanity doesn't beg, Supreme Director. Humanity prepares. The silence that followed Admiral Chen's declaration stretched for exactly 13 seconds. Webb timed it later, would remember that number for the rest of his life. 13 seconds where the future of two civilizations, possibly dozens more, hung in the balance like a droplet of water clinging to a leaf before the inevitable fall. Supreme Director Cathrix broke first. "You're bluffing," he said, but there was a tremor in his voice that betrayed his doubt. "Your ships, your weapons, they're all theoretical. Sensor ghosts designed to make us hesitate. No species makes the leap from chemical rockets to full space technology in less than a generation." "You're right," Chen agreed pleasantly. "No species does. But we had help, didn't we? From species you thought you eliminated. Funny thing about attempted genocide, Director, you really need to make sure you finish the job. The 3% who survive tend to get motivated." In the Zephyron flagship's tactical center, alarms began screaming. Velas practically fell over his console trying to process the incoming data. "Supreme Director, weapons lock. Multiple sources, surrounding our entire fleet formation. I count." He paused, mandibles working soundlessly as he rechecked the numbers. "I count over 2,000 individual targeting solutions. They have us in a sphere of fire. Every ship. Every angle." Cathrix felt his four stomachs clench simultaneously. "That's impossible. Our approach scan showed nothing. Our stealth countermeasures were designed to defeat Council technology." Chen interrupted, her image still filling the view screen with that unshakable confidence. "Not VR-YN quantum fold sensors. Not Kelrath probability web scanners. Not Praxis dimensional phase detection arrays. You've been fighting the last war, Director. We've been preparing for the next one." Commander Park, watching from the remembrance, felt Thesara's crystalline hand rest gently on his shoulder. The VR-YN didn't do physical contact often. Their species found it uncomfortable, a remnant of their evolution on a high-gravity world where touch meant pressure and pressure meant pain. But she'd learned human customs, understood the gesture's significance. "Your Admiral is magnificent," Thesara said quietly. "She makes them understand without firing a shot." "She's following the plan," Park replied. "Give them a chance to back down. Some of us, me included, wanted to just open fire the moment they entered the system. Make an example of them." But Chen argued that showing restraint while demonstrating overwhelming force would send a stronger message. "Mercy when you have the power to destroy." Thesara's voice carried something between respect and confusion. "Humans are strange. The Council would never. That's because the Council thinks mercy is weakness." Park cut in. "They're about to learn differently." On Earth, in 1,000 different bunkers and command centers, humanity held its collective breath. This was the moment everything pivoted. 9 years of secret preparation, of turning every resource humanity could spare toward building an armada in the shadows. 9 years of alliance building with species that had every reason to hate all space-faring civilizations, but chose instead to believe that maybe, just maybe, these newcomers called humans were different. 9 years betting everything on a single calculated gamble, that when push came to shove, the Galactic Council would value self-preservation over pride. Admiral Chen let the silence build again, watching Cathrix's face cycle through emotions his species' evolution had never quite equipped them to hide. Finally, she leaned forward slightly, her expression hardening into something that transcended species boundaries, the look of someone who had seen enough and was done playing games. "Here's what you don't understand about humans, Director. When you came here, you thought you'd found easy prey. Another primitive species to fold into your empire, to exploit and discard. But we've been watching you. Did you think your conquests went unnoticed? That your stellar surveys were invisible? We've known about the Council for 40 years, Director. Since before I was born. This was the revelation that hit Cathrix like a physical blow. 40. That's impossible. Our first survey mission to this system was only 18 months ago. Your first mission to our solar system, yes. Chun confirmed. But you got sloppy 70 light-years away when you glassed the VR homeworld. The energy signature from your bombardment was visible across a quarter of the galaxy to anyone with the right sensors. We saw it. We saw you commit genocide, Director. And we started asking ourselves a question. What happens when they find us? The tactical display updated again, and this time Cathrix couldn't suppress his reaction. The sensor ghosts weren't ghosts anymore. They were solidifying into real, hard contacts as humanity's stealth systems powered down. Not because they needed to, but because Chin wanted the Zephron to see exactly what they were facing. 300 warships, each one massing more than any council vessel, their hulls inscribed with names in a dozen dead languages. The human ships bore names like Retribution, Defiance, and Unbroken. The VRYN vessels carried designations that translated roughly to "We Remember" and "Never Again." Kelrath's ships had no names at all, just coordinates. The exact spatial locations where their homeworld had been before the Council turned it into an asteroid field. You built all this, Bellis whispered, more to himself than anyone else. In less than 40 years. While pretending to be primitives. How? Focus. Chin answered, though the question hadn't been directed at her. Absolute, unified focus. When you know something terrible is coming, when you know that the monsters are real and they're heading your way, you have two choices, despair or prepare. Humanity chose preparation. We militarized our entire civilization, Director. Every resource. Every innovation. Every bright mind who might have been working on consumer technology or entertainment or art instead bent their efforts toward one goal, making sure that when you arrived, we'd be ready. And the cost? Cathrix found himself asking, genuinely curious now despite his fear. What did you sacrifice? Chen's expression flickered, the first crack in her armor. Everything that didn't matter. Luxuries. Comforts. Economic growth. 2 generations of humans grew up knowing they were preparing for a war that might never come. That their childhood, their futures, their dreams were all secondary to survival. We sacrificed normalcy, Director. Peace. The simple joy of looking at the stars and feeling wonder instead of dread. She paused, and when she continued, her voice carried the weight of those lost years. My daughter is 23. She's never known a time when Earth wasn't preparing for this. She's brilliant, could have been an artist, a musician, anything. Instead, she's a weapons engineer on Mars Orbital Platform 7, because that's where humanity needed her. Every family has a story like that. Everyone gave up something. For what? Cathrix demanded. To fight us? To resist integration into galactic civilization? No, Chin said flatly. To make sure that when you offered your integration, we could tell you to shove it and make it stick. The profanity didn't translate well into Zephron, but Cathrix got the sentiment. He looked at his tactical display, at the impossible fleet surrounding them, at the weapons that shouldn't exist aimed at every one of his ships. For the first time in his military career, he was genuinely outmatched. Not just outgunned, outthought, outmaneuvered, and outplayed from the start. What do you want? He finally asked, the words tasting like ash. An excellent question. Chin replied. What we don't want is simple. Your empire, your council, your galactic civilization. We've seen what you do to species who join you. We've found the ruins, Director. We've talked to the survivors. The Council doesn't integrate species, it digests them. Slowly, systematically, until there's nothing left but another client state serving the core worlds. She gestured, and the display behind her changed to show images that made Cathrix's sensory organs contract. Worlds he recognized. Conquests the Council had whitewashed in their official histories. But here they were, documented in unflinching detail by human observation posts that shouldn't have existed. Praxis Secundus, reduced to a water farm. Chin narrated. Population, 3 billion before integration. Population now, 12,000, all working in extraction facilities. The Kelrath worlds, strip-mined until they were geologically unstable. The Verdanian forests, turned into luxury lumber for council bureaucrats' offices. Species after species, drained and discarded. Those are gross oversimplifications. Catholics protested weakly. The economic integration process is complex, requires making slaves of entire civilizations while calling it prosperity. Shin cut him off. We're not interested, Director. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave. You're going to return to the Council and tell them that Earth, our solar system, and a 50 light-year radius around us is now a restricted zone. Any Council ship that enters without explicit permission will be destroyed. No negotiation. No second chances. The Council will never accept that. Catherick said. They'll send more fleets. Bigger fleets. You can't fight the entire galaxy. Can't we? Chen's smile was back, sharp as broken glass. You're right that we can't fight everyone. But we don't need to. We just need to fight you, and win, and make sure every species in the galaxy knows about it. Do you know what happens when word gets out that the Galactic Council's Grand Fleet got humiliated by a species they thought was primitive? When the survivors you tried to erase come back with human weapons and human allies? Understanding dawned in Catherick's eyes. Rebellion? Across dozens of systems. Dozens at minimum. Chun confirmed. We've been in contact with them, Director. The Kelrath. The Praxis. The Verdanians. All the species you thought you'd broken. We've been sharing our technology, our tactics, our strategy. If you attack us, if you destroy us, it won't matter. The knowledge is already out there. The weapons are already built. You'll spend the next century fighting brushfire wars across your entire empire. But if we leave you alone, Catherick said slowly, working through the logic, if we establish your restricted zone and stay out, then maybe, just maybe, those rebellions don't happen. Chin finished. Maybe the species you've subjugated decide to wait, to see what humanity does with its freedom. Maybe they decide peaceful coexistence is possible. Or maybe they rebel anyway, but at least you'll have one less war to fight. It was a masterwork of manipulation, and Catherick recognized it even as he felt himself being maneuvered into accepting it. Give him an out that looked like pragmatism rather than defeat. Let him return to the Council with a story that preserves some dignity. The alternative, being destroyed here, his entire fleet wiped out by a species that was supposed to be primitive, was unthinkable. You've planned this very carefully, he said. 40 years of planning. Chin agreed. We ran every simulation, every scenario. This one, where you leave voluntarily, where we establish deterrence without total war, this was always our preferred outcome. Despite what you might think, Director, humans don't enjoy killing. We're just very good at it when necessary. In the Colorado bunker, Commander Webb leaned over to Admiral Chen, second in command. She's really selling it, isn't she? Think he'll buy it? Captain Rodriguez. Yes, the same Rodriguez who'd made first contact with the VR Wynan 9 years ago, now promoted and serving on Chen's staff, nodded slowly. He has to. The alternative is extinction. Not just for him, but potentially for the entire Council power structure. We're offering him a way out that lets him keep his fleet, his dignity, and maybe even his position. He'd be an idiot not to take it. And if he is an idiot? Rodriguez's expression hardened. Then we execute Option Omega and hope we can rebuild civilization from the ashes. Option Omega. The contingency plan no one talked about except in whispered tones during the darkest planning sessions. If the Zephron attacked, if the deterrent failed, humanity wouldn't just fight defensively. Every piece of Council infrastructure within 100 light-years would be simultaneously targeted. Shipyards, space stations, communication relays, supply depots. Not just the military ones, all of them. The goal was simple: make victory so catastrophically expensive that even if the Council won, they'd lose. Mutually assured destruction, humans called it. A concept borrowed from Earth's own nuclear Cold War, now scaled up to interstellar dimensions. But that was the nightmare scenario. The current situation, tense as it was, represented the dream outcome. Cathrix clearly wanted to live. More importantly, he wanted his fleet to survive. You didn't become Supreme Director by being suicidal. We need guarantees, Cathrix finally said, breaking the silence that had stretched while he calculated his options. If we establish this restricted zone, how do we know you won't use it as a base to build an even larger fleet? How do we know you're not planning to invade Council space? Because we don't want your space, Jen replied instantly. Look at our system, Director. We have everything we need. Resources, room to grow, allies who came to us voluntarily because we offered partnership instead of domination. Why would we want to conquer the galaxy when we can build something better right here? Others might not see it that way. Then, they'll be wrong. But we'll deal with that diplomatically. Here's my offer, Director. Establish the restricted zone as we've outlined. In exchange, we'll agree to a verification protocol. Automated monitoring stations at the zone boundary, accessible to both sides, showing ship movements in and out. We'll even share non-military technology, medical advances, agricultural techniques, things that benefit everyone. We'll prove we're not a threat to anyone who doesn't threaten us first. It was more than Cathrix had expected. Much more. For a moment, he wondered if there was a catch, some hidden clause that would spring on him later. But looking at Chen's face, at the determined calm in her eyes, he realized something that shook him to his core. She meant it. Humanity genuinely didn't want to conquer the galaxy. They just wanted to be left alone. What a novel concept that was in galactic politics. I need to consult with the Council, Cathrix said carefully. You have 6 hours, Chen replied. After that, we'll assume you've rejected our offer and act accordingly. But Director, when you speak to the Council, make sure they understand something. We're not bluffing. We're not overextended. And we're not going away. Humanity is here, we're armed, and we're done being afraid of the dark. What happens next is entirely up to you. The view screen went dark, leaving Cathrix staring at his reflection in the blank display. Behind him, Velas and the other tactical officers waited for orders that their Supreme Director seemed unable to give. Finally, Cathrix stirred. Open a quantum channel to the Council homeworld. Priority Alpha. And Velas, compile every scrap of data we have on the human fleet. Every ship, every weapon signature, every energy reading. The Council needs to see what we're facing. Yes, Supreme Director. Sir, if I may ask, what are you going to recommend? Cathrix was quiet for a long moment. That we accept their terms. That we establish the restricted zone. And that we thank whatever gods we believe in that we encountered a species willing to negotiate instead of one that simply attacked the moment we arrived. But sir, that's tantamount to admitting defeat. The Council's prestige will survive a tactical withdrawal better than it will survive the annihilation of their primary expeditionary fleet. Cathrix snapped. Use your brain, Velas. We came here expecting primitives with chemical rockets. Instead, we found a civilization that's been preparing for this exact scenario for 4 decades, armed with technology we didn't know existed, allied with species we thought were extinct. If we fight them, we might win, but the cost would be catastrophic. And even if we destroyed Earth, their allies would still be out there, armed with the same weapons, angry, and with nothing left to lose. He pulled up the tactical display again, looking at the impossible fleet surrounding them. No Velas. The humans outplayed us. They saw us coming from 40 years away, and prepared a trap so perfect we walked right into it. The only question now is whether we're smart enough to walk back out. In the council chambers, thousands of light years away, Supreme Chancellor Mordrix received Cathrix's report with about as much grace as a volcanic eruption. The holographic display showing Earth's armada might as well have been a personal insult to his century-long reign. "Impossible!" he raged, his 6 limbs gesticulating wildly. The humans were categorized as pre-interstellar, Type 0.7 civilization. They shouldn't have ships at all, much less weapons that threaten council forces. Yet they do. Cathrix's image replied with admirable composure, considering he was essentially admitting failure to a leader not known for his forgiveness. And what's worse, Supreme Chancellor, they're not alone. The Vryn, the Kelrath, others we thought eliminated. The humans found them, allied with them, and together they've created something we'd never encountered before, a coalition of the conquered. Then we destroy them, Mordrix declared. All of them. We should have been more thorough the first time. With respect, Supreme Chancellor, I don't think we can. The chamber fell silent. In 50 years as Supreme Chancellor, Mordrix had never heard one of his Supreme Directors admit impossibility. He forced himself to calm down, to think strategically. Explain. The humans have positioned their forces perfectly, Cathrix continued. They're not attacking because they don't need to. They have us trapped in what they call a Mexican standoff, a situation where any aggressive action results in mutual destruction. If we attack, yes, we'll damage them, but they'll destroy our entire expeditionary fleet. 73 worlds contributed to this force, Supreme Chancellor. 73 worlds that expect their ships to return. And if we send reinforcements? They're prepared for that too. They've shown us sensor data of their production capacity. We're talking about mobile shipyards hidden in dimensional fold space. Facilities we can't detect, much less destroy. For every ship we send, they can build 3. And their allies are supplying them with raw materials from dead systems we don't monitor because we thought they were uninhabited. Another counselor spoke up, a Praxian, ironic, given what they were discussing. What does the human leadership want? Isolation, Cathrix replied. They want a 50 light-year exclusion zone around their system. No council presence, no expansion, no interference. In exchange, they offer verification protocols and even technological sharing for non-military applications. Preposterous, Mordrix spat. We don't negotiate with species we intended to integrate? Cathrix interrupted, his boldness shocking everyone present. Supreme Chancellor, we need to face reality. The humans were never going to be easy prey. They saw what we did to others. They prepared, and now they're offering us a way out that doesn't involve mutual annihilation. I strongly recommend we take it. The debate in the council chambers raged for 3 hours. Mordrix wanted to fight, wanted to send every ship the council could muster to crush this upstart human civilization. But for every argument he made, practical concerns rose to counter them. Economics. The council's military was stretched thin, managing dozens of integration zones. A major war with Earth would require pulling ships from those regions, potentially triggering rebellions they couldn't suppress. Intelligence. They knew almost nothing about human capabilities beyond what the humans had chosen to reveal. Every tactical principle said you don't attack an enemy whose full strength is unknown. Morale. Word of the standoff had already leaked beyond classified channels. Council member species were watching to see how their leadership handled the first real challenge to their authority in centuries. If the Council attacked and lost, or even won at catastrophic cost, questions would be asked. Questions about whether integration was truly voluntary, whether the Council's military might made them right. Questions the Council couldn't afford to answer honestly. Finally, the Praxian counselor who'd spoken earlier, Counselor Thresh, stood and addressed the chamber. Supreme Chancellor, I must speak plainly. My species was integrated 200 years ago. We were told it was for our own benefit, that joining the galactic community would bring prosperity and advancement. What it brought was the destruction of our ocean ecosystems, the conscription of our people into labor forces, and the reduction of our homeworld to a resource extraction site. Mordrix's sensory organs contracted. Counselor Thresh, this is hardly the time. It is precisely the time. Thresh interrupted, his voice carrying across the chamber with surprising force. Because the humans have done something no species has done since the Council's formation. They've said no. And they've made it stick. More than that, they've found and allied with species like mine, species who were told integration was beneficial but learned otherwise. If we attack them, if we try to force our will on them, what message does that send to every integrated species? That the Council's rhetoric about partnership and mutual benefit was always a lie. You're suggesting we just accept their terms? Another counselor demanded. Let them carve out their own independent zone. That sets a precedent we can't afford. Does it? Thresh countered. Or does it show that the Council can be reasonable? That we're willing to coexist with species who simply want to chart their own path? Think about the alternative. We fight the humans, and even if we win, we've proven to every subjugated species in the galaxy that the only language we understand is violence. How many rebellions do we face then? The chamber erupted in heated discussion. Cathrix, still connected via quantum link, watched with fascination. He'd expected the Council to reject his recommendation out of hand. Instead, there was genuine debate. Perhaps 40 years of unchallenged authority had made the Council complacent, but not completely blind. Back in the Colorado bunker, Admiral Chen waited with the patience of someone who had already run every simulation 1,000 times. She knew what the Council was discussing, knew the arguments for and against. She'd planned for both outcomes. Status on the fleet? She asked Webb. All ships holding position. Weapons hot, but safety's engaged. The VR Winan report their full drive disruptors are ready to activate on your command. If the Zephron tries to run, we can trap them in normal space. And Option Omega? Webb's expression darkened. Ready but unused, exactly as planned. Admiral, do you really think they'll accept? Chen considered the question carefully. 65% probability, according to our best analysts. Cathrix is pragmatic. He sees the trap we've laid. The question is whether the Council's leadership will let pragmatism override pride. And if they don't, then we show them why pride is such a dangerous sin. On the Remembrance, Thessera was conducting her own vigil. Around her, the last survivors of the VR Winan prepared themselves for what might come. They'd waited 300 years for revenge, for justice, for the chance to make the Council pay for what they'd done. And now, ironically, they found themselves hoping that revenge wouldn't be necessary. Your species is strange, she said to Commander Park, who stood beside her watching the tactical displays. You prepare for war more thoroughly than any species I've known, yet you hope to avoid it. That's the human paradox, Park replied. We know that the best way to prevent war is to be so overwhelmingly prepared for it that potential enemies think twice. We have a saying, si vis pacem, para bellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. The VR Winan had a similar philosophy once, Thessera said quietly. We believed our fold space technology made us invincible, that no one would dare attack us because the cost would be too high. We were wrong. The difference, Park said gently, is that you thought you were safe. Humans know we're not. We know there are bigger threats out there, worse than the Council. That's why we're not just building weapons, we're building alliances. Preparing not just to survive, but to help others survive too. Thesara's crystalline features shifted in what might have been a smile. You give us hope again, Commander. Not just for revenge, but for something more. The possibility that the galaxy could be better than what the Council made it. That's the goal, Park confirmed. Humans didn't come to the stars to dominate them. We came to explore them, to learn, to meet others and find common ground. The fact that we had to weaponize everything first, that's just survival instinct. But it's not who we want to be. The quantum communication channel from the Council homeworld suddenly activated. Cathrix's face appeared on displays across the human fleet, across allied ships, in every command center from Earth to the edge of the solar system. Admiral Chun, he said formally, the Galactic Council has reached a decision. Chin's heart rate didn't spike. Her biometric implant made sure of that, keeping her body chemistry level even as adrenaline tried to flood her system. This was it. The moment that would define humanity's future among the stars. We're listening, Supreme Director. The Council accepts your proposed exclusion zone, Cathrix continued, and Chin heard Webb's sharp intake of breath behind her. 50 light-years radius around the Sol system, to be respected by all Council vessels. In exchange, you will implement the verification protocols you described and agree to a non-aggression pact covering Council territories. Agreed, Chin said immediately, not giving the Council time to reconsider. We'll begin establishing the monitoring stations within 72 hours. Supreme Director, you've made the wise choice. Have I? Cathrix's expression was unreadable. History will judge, Admiral. But know this, you've changed the galaxy today. Whether for better or worse remains to be seen. The connection ended. For 3 heartbeats, the Colorado bunker was absolutely silent. Then, chaos, controlled chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Officers were shouting, confirming the stand-down orders, spreading the word throughout the fleet. They'd done it. After 40 years of preparation, after sacrificing a generation's normal childhood, after betting everything on a single massive bluff, they'd won without firing a shot. Chin allowed herself 5 seconds of relief before snapping back to business mode. Webb, get me a direct line to all Allied commanders. That's Sarah, Park, everyone. We need to coordinate the stand-down properly. Last thing we need is a jumpy weapons officer starting a war by accident. Already on it, Admiral, Webb replied, his voice shaking slightly with suppressed emotion. All ships acknowledging the ceasefire. The VRYN, Admiral, the VRYN are sending a message. Thus Sarah wants to speak with you personally. The holographic display shifted to show the VRYN Elder's crystalline features. For a moment, Thus Sarah said nothing, and Chin saw something in those alien eyes she'd never seen before. Tears. The VRYN could cry. Who knew? Admiral Chun. Thus Sarah finally spoke, her voice thick with emotion the translator barely managed to convey. My people have waited 3 centuries for this moment. We thought justice would come through fire and blood. Instead, you've shown us something we'd forgotten, that strength can be merciful. That victory doesn't require vengeance. Thank you. Chin felt her own eyes sting. Elder Thess Sarah, it's we who should thank you. Without the VRYN, without your technology and your trust, humanity would have been just another conquered species. You didn't just give us weapons, you gave us hope. And now, together, maybe we can make the galaxy into something better than what the Council created. Across the solar system, the stand-down proceeded smoothly. The Zephron fleet began withdrawing from Earth orbit, moving slowly and deliberately to avoid any appearance of aggression. Human ships maintained their positions, ready, watching, but no longer targeting. The weapons stayed hot, though. Chen had made that call personally. Trust, but verify. And keep the safety off, just in case. On Earth, the news was spreading rapidly. For 40 years, the general population had known something was coming. They'd seen the militarization, the resource allocation, the way their entire civilization had oriented itself towards some distant threat. Now, finally, they knew what it had all been for. And more importantly, they knew it had worked. In Beijing, New York, Mumbai, Tokyo, and 1,000 other cities, people emerged from shelters they'd been told to occupy when the alien fleet arrived. They looked up at the sky, where Zephron ships were visible as bright points of light withdrawing into higher orbits, and they understood. Their species had just announced itself to the galaxy not with a whimper or a plea, but with a roar. President Amara Okonkwo, speaking from the United Earth Government's headquarters in Geneva, addressed the planet and its diaspora across the solar system. Citizens of Earth and the Solar Union, today marks the beginning of a new era for humanity. For 40 years, we've prepared for this moment, the moment when we would meet our neighbors among the stars. Some wondered why we prepared for war when we hoped for peace. Today, you have your answer. The galaxy is not always kind to newcomers. But because we were ready, because we stood together, because we refused to accept subjugation, we have secured our freedom and our future. She paused, looking directly into the camera with eyes that had seen too many classified briefings, too many worst-case scenarios. But let me be clear, this is not the end of our journey. It's the beginning. We've proven we can defend ourselves. Now we must prove we can build something better. That humanity's presence among the stars will be a force for good, for cooperation, for lifting up those who've been pushed down. We didn't come this far just to survive. We came this far to thrive, and to help others do the same. In the council chambers, Mordrix watched Earth's broadcast with emotions he couldn't quite categorize. Anger, certainly. His pride had taken a blow it might never fully recover from. But also something else. Something that felt almost like respect. "Counselor Thresh," he said quietly, calling the Praxian over. "Your species, when we integrated you, did you resist like this?" Thresh's answer was immediate and bitter. "We tried, Supreme Chancellor. We mobilized our ocean fleets, armed with defensive satellites we had. But we weren't ready. We didn't have allies. We didn't have technology that could match yours. So we fought, and we lost, and our world was never the same. And if you'd had what the humans have, the weapons, the allies, the preparation, then perhaps Praxis Secundus would still be an ocean world instead of a water farm," Thresh replied. "Perhaps my people would be swimming free instead of working extraction quotas. Perhaps—" He stopped, his voice catching. "Perhaps we'd be what the humans are about to become, free." Mordrix was silent for a long moment. Then, "Counselor Thresh, I'm appointing you to head a new committee. Relations with independent species. Your first task, establish formal diplomatic channels with Earth and its allies. If we're going to have an independent power on our borders, we might as well figure out how to coexist with them." Thresh's sensory organs contracted in shock. "Supreme Chancellor, are you certain? This is a significant policy shift. The humans have taught us something today," Mordrix said, his voice carrying a weight of reluctant wisdom. "That there are species who cannot be integrated, who will fight with everything they have rather than submit. The question is whether we keep battering ourselves against them, or whether we adapt. I choose adaptation. Perhaps it's time the Council remembered that there are more ways to influence the galaxy than conquest." 6 months later, the first monitoring station went operational at the edge of human-controlled space. It was a joint construction, human engineering combined with VR-Wynen quantum sensors and Kelrath probability matrices. Any ship crossing the boundary in either direction would be logged, analyzed, and tracked. The data fed to both human and council databases simultaneously, a transparency that made some council members uncomfortable, but which Mordrix had insisted upon. "If we're going to trust each other," he'd argued, "then we need to actually trust each other. Half measures won't work with humans. They're too clever, too paranoid. Give them full visibility, or they'll assume the worst." Admiral Chen, visiting the completed station for its commissioning ceremony, found herself standing on an observation deck with an unlikely companion, Supreme Director Cathrix himself, who'd volunteered to represent the council at the event. "It's strange," Cathrix said, looking out at the stars. 6 months ago, we were enemies. Now we're, what? Neighbors? Allies? Neither," Chen replied. "We're competitors. But competition doesn't have to mean conflict. You want to expand council influence. We want to protect our sovereignty and help those who ask for it. Those goals will clash sometimes. The question is whether we handle those clashes with diplomacy or weapons." "And you think diplomacy will work?" Chen shrugged. "It's working so far. Your council has stopped aggressive expansion, at least toward us. You're actually negotiating with the Praxians about ocean ecosystem restoration. The Kelrath are talking about reconstruction aid for their homeworld. These are things that wouldn't have happened if we'd fought. They're also things that make the council look weak," Cathrix countered. "Or they make the council look reasonable," Chen suggested. "Capable of admitting mistakes and correcting them. That's not weakness, Director. That's maturity. And honestly, a mature council is less of a threat than an aggressive one. We can work with mature. We'd have to destroy aggressive." Cathrix felt a chill at the casual certainty in her voice. Even now, after peace had been established, the humans hadn't dismantled their war machine. The Forge world still churned out ships. The weapons remained online. The alliances stayed strong. Humanity had chosen peace, but they'd kept their capacity for war at full readiness. Si vis pacem, para bellum indeed. "What's next for humanity?" Cathrix asked. "Now that you've secured your independence, what are your long-term goals?" Chen smiled, and it wasn't the cold, calculating smile from 6 months ago. This one held genuine warmth. "Exploration. That's what we've always wanted, really. There's a whole galaxy out there we've barely begun to see. Species to meet, wonders to discover, knowledge to gain. We've spent 40 years preparing for war. Now we get to spend the next 40, the next 400, the next 4,000, doing what we always wanted to do, reaching out and finding our place among the stars. And the weapons? The fleets? We'll be there if we need them," Chen replied matter-of-factly. "But hopefully we won't. Hopefully, what we've started here, this idea that strong species can choose peace, that power doesn't have to mean domination, hopefully that spreads. Imagine a galaxy where disputes are settled through negotiation backed by mutual respect rather than conquest backed by fear." "You're describing a fantasy," Cathrix said. 40 years ago, this monitoring station was a fantasy," Chen countered. "Humans and council working together, trusting each other with sensitive security data? Impossible. Yet here we are. Maybe I'm describing a fantasy. Or maybe I'm describing a future we can build together if we choose to." The commissioning ceremony was simple but meaningful. Representatives from a dozen species, humans, VRYNN, Kelrath, Praxis, even some council members, gathered to activate the station. When the quantum sensors went online, when the verification protocols began streaming data to both human and council databases simultaneously, it felt like more than just a technical achievement. It felt like a promise. The galaxy watched humanity's emergence with reactions ranging from fascination to fear to barely concealed hope. The official council narrative was carefully managed. They framed the exclusion zone as a diplomatic accommodation, rather than a defeat, emphasized the peaceful resolution, and quietly buried any mention of how thoroughly the humans had outmaneuvered them. But word got out anyway. It always does. In the Kelrath refugee camps, scattered across a dozen marginally habitable moons, the story spread like wildfire. A species had said no to the Council, had prepared for decades, had allied with the forgotten and the destroyed, and had won their freedom without a shot fired. The implications were staggering. Commander Park, working with Kelrath reconstruction teams, heard the whispers everywhere he went. "Is it true?" they'd ask in hushed voices. "Did humans really force the Council to back down? Did the VRYN really survive? Could we go home?" "It's true," Park would confirm. "And yes, you could go home. We're already negotiating with the Council about Kelrath reconstruction rights. Elder Thesaurus people are providing full space transport technology. Humans are offering engineering support and raw materials. If you want to reclaim your worlds, make them habitable again, we'll help you do it." The hope in their eyes when he said that never got old. On Praxis Secundus, the conversations were different, but equally charged. Counselor Thresh had returned to his homeworld for the first time in decades, and what he'd brought with him changed everything. A council authorization for ecosystem restoration, backed by human technical assistance and funded by reparations that Mordrix had somehow strong-armed through the bureaucracy. "Why?" the Praxian elders asked Thresh. "Why would the council agree to this? Why would humans help us?" "Because the galaxy is changing," Thresh replied. "Because a new power has emerged that doesn't believe in subjugation, and their mere existence is forcing the council to be better than it was. The humans aren't doing this out of pure altruism. They're doing it to demonstrate what's possible. To show every integrated species that there are alternatives to accepting whatever the council dictates. And the council allows this? The council has no choice," Thresh said with grim satisfaction. "They can either adapt to the new reality or face rebellion on a scale that would shatter their empire. Mordrix chose adaptation. Whether his successors will continue, that choice remains to be seen. But for now, for this moment, we have an opportunity to rebuild, to restore what was taken. I suggest we take it." Admiral Chun, meanwhile, was dealing with a different kind of challenge, managing humanity's sudden fame. Every species within 100 light-years wanted to know about humans. Who were they? What did they want? Were they really as formidable as the rumor suggested? Could they be trusted? The diplomatic requests were endless. Trade negotiations, alliance proposals, intelligence sharing agreements, cultural exchange programs. Every minor power that had ever chafed under council authority suddenly wanted to be humanity's best friend. "We need to be careful," Chin warned the United Earth Council during a classified briefing. "We can't be everyone's savior. We don't have the resources, and trying to solve every species' problems would overextend us fatally. We need to choose our commitments wisely. What are your recommendations?" President Okonkwo asked. Chin pulled up a strategic map that showed the local cluster of stars. "Concentric circles of engagement. First circle, our exclusion zone and our existing allies, the VRYN, Kelrath, Praxis, and the others we've already committed to. Full support, full integration, full sharing of technology and resources. Second circle, independent species within 50 light-years. Open trade, cultural exchange, defensive pacts if requested. We help them maintain their sovereignty without making them dependent on us. Third circle, everyone else. Friendly but distant. We engage diplomatically, we trade, but we don't make commitments we can't keep. What about species still under council integration?" another counselor asked. "Tricky," Chin admitted. "We can't actively support rebellions. That would mean war with the council, and we're not ready for that scale of conflict. But we can offer what I call the freedom option. Any species that successfully negotiates independence from the Council will support them the way we support the Kelrath and Praxis. It incentivizes peaceful separation rather than violent rebellion, and it puts pressure on the Council to reform without us having to fire a shot. You're essentially offering to be the galaxy's safety net for anyone who stands up to the Council, Okonkwo observed. In a way, yes. But not a safety net that catches them unconditionally. They have to take the first step themselves. They have to want freedom enough to fight for it, negotiate for it, sacrifice for it. What we're offering is support for species who help themselves. It's going to make us a target, warned the defense minister. We've been a target since the moment we announced ourselves, Chen countered. The question isn't whether the Council or other powers will come after us eventually. It's whether we'll be ready when they do. Every species we help achieve independence is another potential ally. Every world we assist in reconstruction is another voice advocating for the system we're trying to build. We're not just securing Earth's future, we're trying to reshape galactic politics so that our kind of civilization can survive and thrive. The meeting went long into the night, hashing out details of humanity's emerging foreign policy. By dawn, they had a framework: cautious engagement, strategic alliance building, unwavering support for self-determination, and above all, maintaining the military strength that had made everything else possible. 2 years after the standoff, Elder Thessera stood on the rebuilt surface of the VRYN homeworld for the first time in 3 centuries. The radioactive glass had been cleared away, replaced with crystal gardens that captured and refracted light in ways that honored VRYN aesthetics while incorporating human engineering principles. It wasn't what had been lost. Nothing could truly replace that. But it was something new, something that represented possibility rather than extinction. Your species has a saying, Thessera said to Commander Park, who'd accompanied her on this pilgrimage, about teaching a person to fish rather than giving them fish. Give a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach him to fish, feed him for life, Park confirmed. Is that what this feels like? No, Thessera replied. It feels like you gave us the ocean back. Gave us the possibility of fish at all. What we do with it, how we rebuild, what we become, that's ours to determine. But without humanity, without your willingness to help us when you had no obligation to do so, we'd still be dying slowly in that neutron star's gravity well. We had obligation, Park corrected gently. Maybe not legal obligation, but moral obligation. We'd seen what the Council did to species like yours. We knew that if we didn't help, if we just secured our own freedom and ignored everyone else, then we'd be complicit in the same system we'd resisted. Still, Thessera insisted, your people didn't have to care. Many species wouldn't have. The Council certainly doesn't. That's because the Council thinks of other species as resources to exploit or threats to eliminate, Park said. Humans think of them as potential friends we haven't met yet. It's a different paradigm entirely. They stood together watching VRYN children, the first generation born on their homeworld in 3 centuries, playing in the crystal gardens. The future taking shape in real time. Back on Earth, in a coffee shop in Lagos, 2 teenagers sat discussing their career paths. Not unusual, except for the context. One wanted to join the diplomatic corps, specializing in Zen linguistics. The other was aiming for the engineering track, specifically focusing on cross-species habitat design. Can you believe our grandparents grew up not knowing aliens existed? One of them said. Can you believe they spent their entire childhood preparing for a war that didn't happen? The other countered. My grandmother was part of the Forge World construction crews. She says she spent 15 years of her life building warships in secret, wondering if they'd ever be used. At least they were ready. Yeah, but imagine living like that. Every resource devoted to preparation for a maybe war. No art, no music, no anything that didn't contribute to survival. That's why we have to make it worth it. The first teenager said seriously. They sacrificed their normal lives so we could have this one, where we get to meet aliens, learn their languages, build things together instead of just weapons. We owe them that. It was a sentiment echoed across humanity's sphere of influence. The generation that had prepared for war had given the next generation the freedom to pursue peace. But they'd also instilled in them a fundamental lesson: peace is fragile and must be defended. The military academies were still full. The Forge world still operated at capacity. Young humans still trained for combat they hoped would never come. Because the galaxy was still dangerous, the Council was still powerful, and complacency was still the ultimate threat to survival. Admiral Chun, now in her 60s and contemplating retirement, gave a lecture at the United Earth Military Academy that would be quoted for generations. "You've grown up in what we're calling the protected era," she told the cadets. 2 years of peace. 2 years of humanity being recognized as a sovereign power. 2 years of building instead of just preparing. And some of you are wondering why you're still here, why you're still training for war when we've achieved peace. She paused, looking out at faces too young to remember the terror of that first contact. Here's why. Peace is not natural. Conflict is natural. Peace is something you build, something you maintain through constant effort. We have peace now because 40 years ago, people I'll never meet decided to sacrifice their comfort so their descendants, you, could have a chance. And the only way to honor that sacrifice is to ensure their work wasn't temporary. But Admiral, one cadet asked, if we maintain this military readiness forever, aren't we just perpetuating the same cycle of militarization we resisted? Chin smiled. That's the right question to ask. And here's the hard answer. Maybe. There's no manual for this. No species has done what we're trying to do. Build a defensive power strong enough to deter aggression, but not so aggressive that we become the threat we defended against. It's a razor's edge. And every generation will have to walk it, constantly evaluating whether we're still defending or whether we become the aggressors. How will we know the difference? By constantly asking that question. Chin replied, the moment we stop questioning our actions, the moment we become certain that our use of force is always justified, that's when we've crossed the line. Doubt, healthy, constructive doubt, is what keeps us honest. 5 years after the standoff, the Galactic Council underwent its first major restructuring in 4 centuries. Mordrix, facing pressure from multiple fronts, agreed to establish the Independent Species Recognition Protocol. Any species that could demonstrate spaceflight capability, stable governance, and the ability to defend their sovereign space could petition for independent status rather than forced integration. The humans had forced the Council to acknowledge what should have been obvious all along. Conquest wasn't the only path to galactic civilization. The protocol's first successful petitioner was the Aldari, a species from the far side of Council space who'd been quietly building their own defensive fleet while watching how humanity handled first contact. They'd learned from Earth's example: prepare in secret, reveal only when ready, and make it clear that integration would cost more than it was worth. The second petitioner was the Thros Collective, who'd actually sent delegates to Earth to study human diplomatic strategies. They'd incorporated VRYN stealth technology, provided with human blessing, into their defensive grid. The Council granted their petition without even attempting to assert control. We've started something, President Okonkwo said during a secure meeting with her advisory council. Species are following our example. The Council's entire integration model is beginning to break down. Is that a problem? Admiral Chen asked, though she already knew the answer. It's certainly a complication, Okonkwo replied. Every species that gains independence is another potential rival. Not everyone who rejects the Council will be friendly to us. Some might even be hostile. But they'll be independent, Chen countered. Free to make their own choices, their own mistakes. Isn't that better than the alternative? Better philosophically. Okonkwo agreed. Potentially messier practically. We might look back on the Council's empire as the good old days when at least there was one major power to negotiate with instead of dozens of independent actors pursuing their own interests. We'll adapt, Jen said with confidence. That's what humans do best. We didn't prepare for 40 years just to stumble when the galaxy became complicated. 10 years after the standoff, Earth was unrecognizable. The militarization that had dominated society for 4 decades was slowly being balanced by the cultural and economic development that peace allowed. The Forge worlds were being repurposed, not decommissioned, but diversified. Half their capacity went to building exploration vessels instead of warships, scientific stations instead of weapons platforms, colony ships instead of dreadnoughts. But the weapons remained. The alliances stayed strong. The vigilance never wavered. Because humanity had learned the most important lesson the galaxy could teach: hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. Build peace, but maintain the capacity for war. Trust, but verify. Extend the hand of friendship, but keep the other hand on your weapon. The Council had thought humans would beg. Instead, humanity had prepared. And in doing so, they hadn't just secured their own survival, they'd begun to reshape the galaxy itself. One alliance at a time. One freed species at a time. One crystal garden planted on a dead world at a time. The future was uncertain. It always would be. But for the first time in galactic history, it was uncertain in a way that offered hope rather than just fear. And humanity, stubborn, persistent, occasionally violent but ultimately optimistic humanity, had made that possible. Not bad for a species that had been spacefaring for less than a century. Not bad at all. So what do you think would happen if more species followed humanity's example? What kind of galaxy would emerge if self-determination became the rule rather than the exception? Let me know in the comments below. I want to hear your thoughts on where you think this story goes next. And if you enjoyed this vision of humanity's first steps into a hostile galaxy, make sure you hit that subscribe button because this is just the beginning of the stories we're going to explore together. This is StoryVix, reminding you that sometimes the best weapon is being so prepared for war that you never have to fight one. Until next time, keep looking up at the stars and wondering what looks back.